Entrepreneur Perspectives is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, a production company and content network. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com. All right, so we'll go live. Get the person talking. That's all we're doing. And then it doesn't even have to be an interview. It's just you're talking about business. So I think a lot of times like, oh, I'm here today and I'm going to introduce you. You can do that, but I think it makes it awkward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, as far as agents are concerned, I think it's, talking about their story. And it's amazing how many people have an interesting story about how they got in the business. Like, I went to college and my major was criminal justice and political science.
That's crazy.
So then you're like, well, how does that translate into being in the insurance business? And I think that I was a natural salesman. And so, I kind of avoided it for a while, and my mother was in sales. And so then, you kind of get into that and, you sort of back into it. But I think a lot of agents have interesting stories that you can kind of understand what they're doing and how they got into what they're doing. And
yeah. I think today kids are so focused on like what they're going to major in and like what career they're going to have. So I'm going to go work and I'm going to go to this school. I'm going to major in finance, or I'm going to major in computer science, or whatever that is. And that's going to get me this job. And it's not a bad path to have like that idea. But I think what happens a lot of times is like criminal justice. And next thing you know, you're in the insurance business somehow, or the financial services industry. That had nothing to do with it, but it had everything to do with it. So I just think we get lost in, well, you have to do it this way. Like, well, there's things you don't know right now. Like, how would you know? Right. Did someone come to you one day and say like, you should be a salesperson? Was it your mom that told you like you should be selling stuff? Or
yeah, no, I actually took some, tests that are, kind of designed to tell if you're a person that might be in sales, and I always scored really high. And of course, my mother recruited agents for Mass Mutual. And so, of course, she's trying to recruit me. And so I'm the one big recruit that got away. I didn't want to work for a captive company at the time. So I had a professor one time tell me that a college degree, I mean, obviously there's certain specialties that you're getting specific education for, but a college degree sometimes is just a ticket punch. It just proves that you can stick to something, that you have, that you're committed to what you're doing. And so that kind of translates into any job that you're going to be dedicated to it and keep going. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of stress too with kids, because they think if I don't have this track and I don't, like, someone asks, well, what are you studying? And they say, oh, like, and you have an answer, and let's say it's an answer that that person doesn't think is the right path. They could judge you, you could feel judged. And then all of a sudden you're like, am I doing the wrong thing? I got to call my mom or dad up and tell them like, I don't think I'm majoring in the right thing. And it's kind of to your point, so many different ways to get there. Like, you probably I think any business owner we talk to, especially this day, would have a story like that was like, I didn't major in any of that stuff. I talked to a guy and he was high up at one of the banks. I think it was Wells. He might have made his rounds to the different banks. And he says, I've changed my major 3 times and I don't even know if it mattered what he majored in. He said, he's like, what he finished in had nothing to do with it. I ended up getting a job, internship. But like you said, your mom, a friend, a neighbor, someone you met, you were like, someone's like caddying at a golf club and they're like, oh, I like this kid. You should come, check out what we do over here at this car dealership or something. I don't know,
Yeah, that's the thing is I always, I guess, like talking to people. And that's part of what you and I do every day, is being willing to talk to people about things and trying to connect with people. So I always felt like I was pretty good at that. And I always had the work ethic, I think. And I was a lunatic in college. I went to college and then worked at UPS at night, stayed out there till 4 a.m, go home, sleep a few hours and go back to class. And so that's what you need in our business, is you certainly have to be out there and talking to people and doing it every day. So
yeah. But you said it like the stories you were talking about before, about all the agents have stories and all the business owners have stories. And I think that's like you coming on here and talking. I know when you said, hey, let's talk today or whatever, and trying to figure out like, well, what do you want to talk about? Like, and we just start talking. At the end of the day, that's all you do. Like when you sit down at a business meeting, it's not like someone, calls the meeting, right? They do that in a board meeting, but even then they're still talking. Like what'd you do this weekend? You watch the game or whatever. Like that's real life. That's living. It's not structured. And when it actually gets structured, like I'll find myself at a board meeting and, whether it's the Financial Services Association, whatever that was in Charlotte, you go to the board meeting, I'd find myself like I was wasting time there. Like, this is boring. I could be doing so many other things. It's not that I was disinterested in the people or the topic or whatever. It was like, it was overly structured and it wasn't going anywhere. And it was just people talking to talk. And it's just, we're not doing anything. So what else can we do? What story? Let someone get up and tell a story, right? Tell a joke. Like, what did you do? And like, what's working in your business? And like, let's go do that at the next meeting. Like, that would be so much more useful. Or put a mic in the middle, go around the room, tell a story, and like let's share that stuff, and then let's get other people to share that stuff. And I think that's what, like, when you had asked me like let's talk and what we talk about, I think you said it right at the beginning, like stories, like who's out there, what are they sharing, and those stories relate to so many things. It could be the person that you want to work with in the future, the person you want to hire, your team. Like you don't want to lose that employee. So what stories do they have? You can share the stories, or they might hear your story and be like, oh, that was really inspiring to me. Like I didn't know he went through that. And that's really cool. Or he was in college and he was kind of a mess and he majored in something totally different. And here I'm thinking that don't have it figured out. But my boss actually lived the same life that I lived, because I used to do the same thing going to I worked at FedEx actually, right? And then like I didn't get a lot of sleep, but they could hear that. It's like all of a sudden you're aligned on something that you had no idea about. You just think, well, no, he's just doing really well. And I can't align with that. But then when you hear the story and you hear it being told, you're like, that humanizes it, right?
Well, I know, my tagline is storyteller, and I try to tell stories that I think people can relate to. And obviously you and I have a lot of experience in selling, doing what we do in our business, but also the people. And, I've had the claims that I've helped people with and the difference that, the insurance made in their life, whether it be disability or life insurance. And so you tell those stories to people, and I think you really connect. And then, I know with the long-term care, we used to do a lot of long-term care seminars. And, my goal was to get people to start talking, because you sit there and you start talking about, this is what happens if you don't have long-term care, and your assets are exposed to Medicare or Medicaid. And, and people will start talking, yeah, my mom, and all of a sudden you got the crowd talking. So you're not really making a presentation. You're just, everybody all of a sudden is just sharing stories. And that was always my goal. I'll tell you a funny story. I had one I was doing at the senior center up in Mooresville, and there were some very, very old people, like ancient people. And so I was telling a story about my grandmother before she died. She was sort of bedridden and she had a bell, and she would ring the bell if she needed my dad to come help her. And, she'd ring the bell. And so this lady in one of my meetings says, oh, I've got a story about a bell. And she's about 93 years old. And so she says that, she was sort of bedridden at one point, and she said, I was living with my sister, and she said, I had to use a bedside toilet. And she said, so she gave me a bell, and when I was finished, I would ring the bell. And so she said, one day I'm in there and I'm done, and I'm ringing the bell, and my sister's older than me. That was the other thing. She's 95 years old. And she said, I could hear her in the kitchen going, oh, there's the ice cream man. Let's go get some ice cream.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm in there on the toilet. So,
Oh my God.
those, and I mean, the whole place just absolutely fell out, And I said, but I still tell that story to this day, and people like it, but it's just a way to kind of connect with people instead of just walking up and saying, hey, do you want to buy some life insurance? Even I don't want to do that. So.
Yeah. Well, that just plays itself really well into like this medium of like podcasting or clips or whatever. And not everyone can do that, right? Like that's a gift you have. Like you've done it a lot. So obviously you practice it, or it's just a natural thing for you. Is you could show up to a meeting and tell a funny story. A lot of people would be afraid, like if I tell the story and I miss some lines, it's not going to land and I feel like an idiot, right? It's like you're back in high school and you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have said that, that sort of thing. But for people who can tell a story, and the story can be interesting. The story could be like, it doesn't have to land in a funny way. It could be dramatic. It can be informational, educational, whatever that might be. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here, right? There's businesses, you go drive down Providence Road in Charlotte or pick a street anywhere in this country, there's businesses everywhere, whether they're successful financial companies or they're mom and pop shops or the corner grocery store. And they all have stories that they can share. And it might be about the people that started the business, might be about what happened this morning or the robbery that happened. And when you learn about that, it just brings people, like you said, it's like that connection point that we can have something. And that's what we're passionate about, is like sharing these stories and helping people say, hey, you tell a really good story, but only that room got to hear that story, or that one person you talked to that one day got to hear that story. Imagine if you could tell that story and it goes on a medium like a podcast or a clip on TikTok or YouTube, and 50 people got to hear it, 100 people got to hear it, or one more person got to hear it, or maybe it's thousands, right? That's great. That changes the game. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, who is that guy? That's really funny. Or someone might hate it and not like it and say, that's the dumbest story I've ever heard. Okay, cool. They're just feeding the algorithm now, and it gets it in front of more people. And so it is a lot about what we're passionate about to get those stories out there. And what's cool about it is they're always like, that was fun. I just hung up with the phone when you came over here, right? We're about to start recording. And I needed a second because the guy was telling me a story and I just wanted to make sure I was dialed into his story. He had just done a podcast. It's supposed to be an hour long. They went for 2 hours. This guy's a warrior. He's like a mindset. He trains like elite athletes and celebrities and all this kind of stuff. And he's telling me these stories. And he had just talked for 2 hours in this podcast and does very well. And he's got so much energy post the recording. He's like, I crushed it. And now he's telling more stories. So then he talks for another 45 minutes. What that did was just gave him more energy. And I think it's just because you feel heard in this day and age with phones. I'm holding my phone up right now. People don't feel heard anymore. Like I could be talking to you and you're not. That's why you always say, I want to be in person with the person because I want to see them. I want to look at them. But today I could still be talking to you and looking down on my phone and it's distracting. It's distracting to obviously me. I'm not hearing your whole thing. It's distracting to you. Now though, when you get to like come on and answer and just have a conversation and the mics are on or the cameras are on or whatever. And if you can get past that point, which I know is difficult to do, it's such a rewarding experience. It just sounds weird, but it's true because it's like, it's one of the fewest places now where you totally can like just say things and talk about it. And I got to tell my story today. That was like, I even learned something about myself today. I hear that a lot. And people are like, that's the favorite part of my day. And sometimes it's draining too, because you're like, maybe you opened up about something that you hadn't talked about before. So there's that. But in the long run, like the net positive is it's going to have a rewarding experience. So forget all the business and the return on investment, all that. That's all there. I get all that. The reward of just like feeling better about it and the motivation you have of like maybe you're creative or you just got to share something. And next thing you know, it's like, that's going to help you in all those things. On top of the fact that more people heard your story, more people connected. I shared this with my cousin. My cousin thinks this is great. He wants to talk to you now, right? Like those things happen.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think you're 12 years younger than me.
So we're doing the math now.
Yeah, we are doing that. I think I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
How old are you now?
I thought it was 49.
49. So you're actually, you're 12 years younger than me.
Made me blush.
Well, the funny thing is though, is I think that you and I work well together because, I have the little bit of old school thing where you want to meet and talk about insurance, let's meet and do it, and you have a more creative way of connecting with people. And that's really over the years. I mean, we've been working together. I was trying to figure it out. Probably more than 20 years now.
That's a lot of math. Yeah. 2004, I started.
So 22 years.
That's crazy.
That's amazing.
It's the age of my son, my oldest son, because he was, I think I wasn't pregnant, but they say we were pregnant.
Absolutely.
But it's like your wife's the one who's pregnant.
Right.
But we were pregnant. Like you weren't pregnant with anything. But anyway, that was when we met you guys. It was 04.
Yep. It's amazing. But you have always given me a different way to look at things. And over the years, I've embraced it. I know you've said a couple times, you're kind of sneaky technical. You say you don't know all these things, and then all of a sudden you're doing them. And so it's been good for me. I think and I tell people all the time that you and I kind of have that I have this more direct approach. I do want to be in front of people. I want to meet with people, and that's going to segue into something else I think we wanted to talk about. But you have kind of helped me to say, hey, there's other ways to connect with people that have nothing to do with talking about insurance. It's talking about their experience and what they've been through. And I've got some agents that are 4th and 5th generation agencies. Well, that's kind of cool. Like my great grandfather started this agency in 1930. That's a cool story to hear about. And so this kind of format, I think, can really bring those stories out that you wouldn't hear every day.
Yeah. Does it have anything to do, because I asked you generation wise, because you're considered what, a Gen X, boomer?
I guess I'm a baby boomer. I'm the last year of the baby boomers. 64 is considered the last year.
Have you heard of Gen Jones?
I had not heard that. Yeah.
So it's Generation Jones, which is apparently, and it had something to do with keeping up with the Joneses or whatever, because that was around the time period where people would start buying houses in the suburbs and bigger houses or cars or what, like that became like, no one really did that before then. But there's this hybrid period between the boomers and Gen X, and they call themselves Gen Jones. I had not known that. We looked up, that was crazy. And then it got posted on another podcast that we have. And all these people like, that's me, I'm Gen Jones. I'm like, that's crazy. So again, generations are always like, it's just branding. But it is interesting because it's like how you grew up and like when you came home from school, what was happening in the house, where were the parents, who was it's like today, houses are a lot of times centered around the kids activities, what they can do. For boomers, it was centered around the father. Right? The father figure, what do we do? And this is when you show up.
Yeah. Be silent at the table unless you're spoken.
Yeah. So I just said, no, that's kind of like off the beaten path, which is a beautiful thing about podcasting. And it's your shit, your show. You can do whatever you want to do, that you can go down those tangents and come up with new ideas to talk about it. Things like, I never even thought about that. That's really cool. And I have a story about that, right? That was a story about generations, but that's no different than a conversation you would have. Because if you're meeting with the person, and let's say you're talking about, I don't know, they called you in there to talk about simple stuff like life insurance, right? Like, I want simple term insurance policies, whatever, right? And they start telling a story about their parent and this issue that they had at the long-term care facility and how much money it costs and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, and they may not even know about long-term care. They didn't understand it. They just thought it was too expensive or who knows. And then you start telling like, well, that came up. All of a sudden we can change that around. And let me tell you a story about that and what that looks like. And you can't get that like through an email or through a text message. Now, those tools of technology of emails and texts and Zoom calls are super important, right? Obviously. But to get to those, like, it's like fact finding where like I'm just asking you basic questions because I know you can find stuff in there. I think the better way to do is actually sit down and have a conversation with them. The best thing would be like, let's have a cup of coffee, let's have a bourbon, let's have some water, whatever let's not even drink. Let's just sit at a table and like talk about some stuff because you don't know anything about that person. And that's where it comes from.
Well, that's my thing about being face to face is, of course, we're doing more and more where you're talking to people over the phone or it's a Zoom call, and less where people actually want to meet. And we talk about the newer generations. The newer generations are totally uninterested in, do you want to meet for 45 minutes? No, I want to do a Zoom call, or show me how to do it online, which is fine. And I'm embracing those things. And that's my thing is I want to stay relevant. I don't want to say, hey, I'm not going to take that technology, even though you hear me fuss all the time about things. But like you said the other day, I mean, one of the statements you made that really hit home is, these things are coming and it's here. It's like NIL. You mentioned NIL and you said, hey, NIL's here. So, you don't have to pay players if you don't want to, but you're going to be 1-11.
Right.
You're not going to win. And so you've got to be willing to do those things and you got to be willing to change. And that's what I want to do. And so, a lot of our agencies, I used to go out and I could see 12 or 13 agents a day. And they were at their office and you could go in and talk to them. And most of the agents now are at home. I mean, a lot of my bigger agencies, they're working from home. They're not going into an office. You can't drive by their office. They're not interacting with their coworkers. So how do you get information out? How do you connect with people in different ways that are not necessarily face to face?
Yeah.
So I think this is one of them.
This is one of them. And you can do this remotely, right? Sometimes it's just like, you're 4 hours away from them. You're 8 hours away from them. And it's just impossible to get together. Well, it's the next best thing you can use, right? Is the technology to put you in the same room together. You can still see the person, right? It's not 3D yet, but it will be someday soon. But yeah, that NIL is so true. I was listening because I was like, okay, so what does Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama do? Right? Because what they've done is they've recruited at a very high level. They go get 5 stars, 4 stars, right? And they fill the roster. They know who they want. And they're good at identifying who the talent is, right? And if those schools offer, like, the kid's probably good. It doesn't always work out, but there's a good chance. Well, now that they're losing kids like freshmen, 5-star kids that were just got there. But what they're saying is those kids, those 5-star kids are actually asking for more money. Like, I'm here, I'm at Ohio State, I'm at Georgia, I want $1 million now. And you're like, first of all, you never really played. And we saw you in practice every day. You're not the guy. And you're 18, 19 years old. We can let you go and you go where you want to go. And chances are that kid's going to do well because Georgia, Bama, and Ohio State offered, and they played there for a year. Any school is going to want to take them. And they'll offer them $1.5 million, let's say. So what Ohio State will do is like, we'll go get the 21, 22-year-old safety from Duke or the wide receiver that's been there for 5 years because you have to. So it's not what they wanted to do, but now they have to do it. Because if you want to play against Indiana now, who's got 23, 24, 25-year-olds, you have no choice but to age up. 18-year-old versus a 23-year-old is like a night and day difference, as we know, right? That's why freshmen don't play a lot. That's why seniors play more. And so the system's going to change. It's like, yeah, but the brotherhood and you stay with the guys for 4 or 5 years, it's just over. And so it's changed, it's evolved. And it's interesting because like sports become like a microcosm of what's going on in real life. Like you just said, technology is changing. AI's here. I don't know what to tell you. People can get mad at AI. They can say, hey, it's using up all the water and the electricity. And I get it. But so are so many other tools. But I don't know how you stay relevant without these things.
But it's coming. Yeah.
It's across everything. And so you could get mad and you could opt out, right? To your point with NIL, you'd be like, as a fan, you could opt out. Be like, I don't like the system. Like, it's just uninteresting to me. These aren't kids that I'm going to get to know because this kid's now played for 7 schools. Like, I saw a kid, he's like literally going to his 7th school. And that's like, you apply to 7 schools to pick the one. This kid literally has gone to 7 schools and he's not alone in that. But anyway, the system's changing. So as a fan, you'd be like, I'm out. I don't want to watch. But as a coach, do you want to part? Like, there's coaches like Saban's like, I'm done with this shit. I don't want to be here anymore.
Coach K at Duke. I think that he retired because of that. He just wasn't going to do that. Yeah.
And maybe they're bitter because like they had an upper hand and an advantage because they were paying people on the back door. People could say what they want. They were. I mean, everyone knows it. And now they have more. Now Indiana and Texas Tech are coming in there and you're like, shit, they actually are paying the kids now. So now I have more competition. So those three schools or whatever schools, they're not going to have the 75 blue chip players anymore. But what they're going to do is they're going to say, you know what? We'll go get the 30 to 40 and our bottom roster is not going to be as good. Maybe we'll have some upside players, maybe some more veteran players and the new game we're playing. And so that's, are you opting in or opting out? And it's no different than technology. Like, you know what? You could keep going to that office that they sold that no guys are there. No one's going to be there, but you can keep going. Like you drive by it every day, knock on the door. There's like a new company there. Be like, we don't sell insurance here anymore, whatever.
Right. Nobody comes
there,
by. Yeah.
So you have to adjust and say, listen, I can't meet Jimmy in person, but I can tell him, hey, let's meet for lunch or let's do phone calls or text. Use the technology for you. And then you do find there are companies that are there. So go and do that, right? So there's always a way to adjust. And I think that's the beautiful thing about people in sales, let's say. Because I think that's a lost art because you're talking about like education before. I think like we think you have to major in this, but like what if you're just good at storytelling and sales? Like what can you do with that? All sorts of stuff, right? Everyone's selling. So like just go and do it. Like you have this resilience that you have. And you can get down, right? You might call me up like, man, I think I might just go work at Walmart. Right? You say that all the time. And I think that's good. And, you know, but then what you're doing is you're just like, it's like an outlet. And then once you got it out, then you go for a walk, you go for a workout, and you're back at it the next day. Like you never called me like, you know what? I think I'll go work at Walmart because it's kind of funny in a way. And it's not to knock Walmart at all or anything.
No.
Good stuff. But like, then you, like the next day, you're just back at it. Like there was never a day that you were not back at it. And you might have woken up with a cold and be like, shit, I don't care. I'm just going.
Yep.
You know,
well, that's the way, you know, our old boss at our other company, I would go in there and I mean, I don't know why, but because I think I was relatively successful. But, you know, every year you'd have these months that just were terrible. And it just, no matter what you were doing and you were given the same effort, it wasn't like, you know, I get out here and do this every day. But you just have months that just, you know, things are not coming together the way, you know, I would go in there and, you know, I felt like I'd sold my last case, which was not true. And then finally he reminded me, he said, you know, we have this conversation every year. Like this month, every year, you come in here and we have this conversation.
Yeah.
And then you go out and, you know, knock it over the fence. And what I realized is I just like to fuss. I like to bitch. And because, you know, if you're in business, it's not easy. No matter what your business is, there's always challenges. And I remember Bobby Knight, you know, when he was at Texas Tech coaching basketball and they weren't as good as he had been at Indiana. And somebody said, Coach, what did you learn about coaching at a school that maybe is not as big in basketball? And he said, you know what? You work just as hard for a lower result. And it's not always the result you want, but you're still working just as hard. And so the boss we had before, he said, look, as long as you're doing the right things, then you're going to end up being successful. And I found that to be true. So that's what, you know, as we transition to things like AI and podcasts and Zoom calls versus face-to-face appointments, I think you just have to say, okay, how am I going to be successful, but doing it in a different way? You know, the first experience I had, I mean, when I first started, because I'm a lot older than you, I didn't have a cell phone. I had a pager, literally had a pager. And my boss told me, you need to keep a roll of quarters in your pocket so that you can hit the nearest payphone. Okay, that sounds ridiculous. And so I'd get a page. I didn't have a laptop. And you would hit the nearest payphone and start dropping quarters. What do you need? And I'd call the office, the 800 number. Can you quote this and send it to this agent? And, you know, if I got an email during the day, I had a laptop at home or a computer. I didn't have a laptop. You just didn't do that email till you got home. And, you know, I sold a lot of insurance that way. COVID came in and, you know, all of a sudden you couldn't meet with people. Nobody wanted to meet. And so you had to learn to do things, DocuSign and other ways of getting that business done. And, you know, the COVID year was one of my best years, which was amazing. A lot of people said, you know, how could that be your best year? But it really was. It refreshed how we were doing things. And so I think we're there. I think we're in that transition now.
Yeah, that's crazy. You just went from payphones to COVID and you just skipped over like 30.
Oh, yeah. The rest of it, was boring.
But it is because you set those anchors. And I think that's right. No, I say that in a way that's like, it does make a lot of sense. And a revolutionary, like a pager at that time was probably like, this is crazy. I got the new pager. You look at this thing, like I get the notification immediately. Like people that you didn't know what the future was going to hold. I was watching, there's a documentary about the Blackberry. I think it's actually called Blackberry. Have you ever seen that? And because I remember when those things came out and you hear the clicking and they talked about it. That was the click. Like that click was like what sold it. And they were fascinated. And they refused to let go of that clicking noise that you had on the Blackberry. And then they were laughing and everyone else was laughing when Apple came out. I was like, we have a screen and you can't touch the keys. They're like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever seen. No one's ever going to do that. And they went down with the Titanic. I mean, they were just like, we're riding this thing. No one's going to use it until, the rest is history.
Yeah, we had Blackberries, I guess. I know
we had numerous of them. And you just had those things. And it was life-changing what that was. Like, you basically have a computer and you're out there sending emails and text messages. Like, it was crazy.
My first laptop that I got, I thought I was revolutionary. But, the laptop caused a Gateway 386 or whatever it was. And it was $3,000.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was $3,000. And now, I've got the laptop I just bought a year ago was like $500.
That's crazy.
And it does 10 times what that Gateway did.
Not even close. Yeah. I just bought an expensive one, like a MacBook Pro. I need it because I'm running all the stuff. I got AIs running this stuff going, insurance, whatever. And what that thing does, like that would have cost $50,000, $100,000 that year. It was crazy. We said Blackberry, Gateway. I don't think the Gateway's a business anymore. Either they got bought out or went out of business. I have my iPad here. I could look it up because that's always fun to do while we're talking. Like, whatever happened to Gateway? And you learn like chapter 11 or some shit. And these are the companies, Kodak, right? They just didn't, Blockbuster, right? They didn't make it because they didn't do the evolution. Those are extreme examples, but they're great stories, right? Those are great stories to look at and say, well, what did they do wrong? Because then you could sit down and you can apply it to yourself. You're like, well, that's stupid, right? Like when we started creating content, articles, podcasts, whatever, there's plenty of people in the insurance industry that laughed. They told us, that's stupid. That's dumb. Why would you do that? I don't get it. And that happened a lot. And it was so funny to watch some of those people because I know who they are and they know who they are. And they're posting on LinkedIn about the books they read this weekend and they're creating content. And you know what? I'm not mad at it. I just think it's just, that's how the stuff happens. And I'm not saying I'm the visionary. No, there's plenty of people doing this before we were doing it, but it has evolved. And I think there's more and more people. And look at you. It's, I don't know, let's say it's Wednesday, late in the afternoon, 3-something o'clock. And here you are recording a podcast. If I'd have done this with you 10 years ago, you've been like, what are you talking about?
I need to be out there seeing agents and doing sales. And
but this thing can go out, it can become a clip and whatever. And like, maybe it's maybe you become a speaker. Maybe you're just a storyteller. Maybe you're the next Jerry Seinfeld. I don't know. But like, how do you know until you start doing that thing? And maybe you're just clearing some thoughts through your own head to figure out like, oh, what could this look like?
And I think if you don't progress, if you're not willing to change, I think, one of the analogies I used in our sales meeting a couple of weeks ago, the last buggy whip salesman. So, at some point in the past, the car was coming in and people were buying cars, but there was a guy out there who said, hey, I'm the number one buggy whip salesman in the country, and I'm the best at it. But at some point, nobody wanted what you had. And so you might be the greatest at that, but because you're not saying, hey, I need to start selling cars or tires or something that goes along with the car, because that's the next generation. I can be good at selling buggy whips, but I'm not selling anything because nobody's buying. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And with your good influence, of course, is to try to say, hey, keep dragging myself into the modern times.
Well, I think it'll be cool too, as you talk to, I know you want to talk to business owners because you're just fascinated by their stories and like that. And you want to give a platform for them to talk about it, right? It's going to help their business out. But every business owner that sits in this chair and they'll sit right here, right? They're going to be able to tell stories of those, right? Like it could have been 2 years, it could have been 2 months ago, right? It could have been 20 years ago, their grandfather or whatever. I think they're going to have these stories of, I remember making that pivot. I remember when we did it this way and then we iterated and we changed it to that. Because a lot of people are like, it's not like I don't even know what what the phrasing is or something like, you don't have to create 1,000 products. It's just 1,000 iterations of one product or about 1,000 iterations of the one way you go about that. Right? Like, so this is one iteration and then you'll do it again and again. Then you might even, like, here's my first question I want to ask everybody. I don't know. Like, we don't know what that's going to be, but you only get in there by like showing up every day. Like you have a new iteration. How do I get a hold of this person? This isn't working. I'm not getting through to them. I got to keep trying it a different way. So I think as you talk to business owners, you're going to find these nuances that they can tell you in these stories. And they might all relate to some other extreme story that's been told a million times, but that's the purpose of it, right? Like, someone else can have a similar story, but it's still going to be different because it's uniquely theirs and they're going to tell it in their own unique way to you on a mic, right? And that's a beautiful thing. And who knows what that can do and what someone can learn from that.
Well, I think it energizes the person that's telling the story. And then it's energizing the person that relates to the story and saying, hey, I just thought about my grandfather. My mother's father was born in 1900. And she tells me she's 86 now. And so every week she tells me that her dad was the number one salesman for the Diamond Match Company. Imagine that's your job. I sell matches.
That's crazy.
And he was good at it. He was good at selling matches. And who would think you'd have a salesman to sell matches, but those were jobs, and that's what people did. And that's an interesting story that,
That's so cool.
he made a living at selling matches.
What would he sell today?
I don't know. I mean, I
Because
think
he wouldn't be selling matches, but he would have figured something else out. I guarantee you someone from that generation would, oh, well, you know what? There are matches out there. And you still go to restaurants and they don't have them as much as they used to. My mom used to not collect them. You go to a cool restaurant, take them, you stick them in, and you use them at some, and then you get to look at it. It's kind of cool. It doesn't take up space.
I remember going to that trip.
And that place was burned down now and too many matches now.
Yeah. Too many matches.
Yeah. But like that individual who sold matches or whoever, like they would have changed it and they would be selling something different.
That's right. And I think that
they'd be selling electrical engines for Tesla or some shit like that.
Natural salespeople can, whatever it is. But his way of selling was, he was on the road. I mean, he would go out and see the customer and do you need some matches? And sort of like Napoleon Dynamite where the guy's selling Tupperware, just going door to door, Uncle Rico. So,
the next quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
That works.
There was, who was the other one? The founder, Michael Keaton, when he was the McDonald's stories, and he's out there selling milkshakes. And he's on the road and couldn't figure, I got a 3-spinner or whatever they'd call it, right? That's good stuff, man.
Well, that's like, just MC, we'll just name drop here, but
I love it.
MC Hammer, MC Hammer, what he would do is go to clubs and go in and dance. And, he just had that unique dance and he would light the club up with the way he was dancing. And then he would say, I got records out in the car and selling them out of his trunk. And that's how that guy ended up making millions and just self-promoting and just being on the road, getting it done.
That's crazy. So, I didn't know that, how he did it. And then he gave all his millions away to his family and friends and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But that's the next thing. So then you got to buy life insurance or disability insurance, right?
Yeah. Well, Charles Barkley talked about when you get money, the first thing you have to learn how to do is say no. He said, because you got everybody that you've ever known coming out of the woodwork that wants to borrow money. And he said, your first inclination is, let me help them out. But next thing you know, you got all your money lent out to people. So,
oh man, it's gonna be tough in that world because you get the lottery ticket is what they call it, right? If you're a professional athlete. And these kids, I just talked to a sports agent, the last thing we say, but he said he's talking to a lot of parents and coaches in high school and college. And he said the financial literacy is zero. They have no idea what to do, how to manage it. They're asking questions like, do we have to report this on our taxes? And he's like, oh dear Lord, like, I don't know what we're going to do. And then people, like, to your point, are coming out of the woodwork and asking for money. I was there. I took him to practice. I did whatever those things were. And it's a really, really tough situation. And then it gets in the family and people get upset. I mean, you just use your imagination where that goes.
Well, this is good.
Yeah, man. This is very good, man. Well, I appreciate it. Let's keep doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
I'm in.
Let's go. Thanks for listening to Entrepreneur Perspectives. This show is produced by Quiet Loud Studios, where we create podcast writing and original media. Learn more at quietloudstudios.com.